Hey, this is Mama Jane.
And this is Mama Vicky. Welcome to the Cycles and Sanctity podcast.
I'm a Billings ovulation method instructor and a certified Catholic mindset coach.
And I'm a labor and delivery nurse, an IBCLC, and a La Leche League leader.
We're here to share with you the beauty and the pain of your cycles.
Have you considered honoring your cycle throughout the journey of your womanhood?
Have you ever considered your cycle as a tool towards your holiness?
Well, sisters, it is. We're excited to walk this journey with you.
So go grab your favorite journal and pen and your hot beverage, and let's do this. Hey, Mama Vicky, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. How about yourself, Mama Jane?
I am doing really well. I'm really excited about this episode. We're going to be talking about weaning our breastfeeding child. That's always an interesting endeavor.
Absolutely.
First of all, I would love for you to explain what is weaning.
So honestly, the definition of weaning is as soon as your infant takes something besides their nutrition at breast. So as soon as they, and even a pacifier, like if the baby's not going to breast, then you are starting the process of weaning. Now, it naturally occurs as babies grow. So your 3-month-old does not nurse as often as your newborn did, and your 6-month-old maybe not as much as your 3-month-old did, or the pattern changes.
Right, longer hours.
Right. So it's by the natural normal progression, weaning starts, but the actual definition is when you start giving baby nutrition other than from your breast.
Okay. So does that also include when a woman pumps and gives the breast milk through a bottle, like a working mom?
That's a very good question. Yes and no. Yes, because obviously if mom goes back to work, baby's not going to be at the breast because mom's not there. And almost every mother does experience a drop in supply when they go back to work, not because they're doing anything wrong, but when you're home with your baby might eat for a minute or two, and here and there, like you miss these little feedings throughout the day that tells the milk factory, oh, we don't need that much milk. So your body makes a little less.
Right.
So I always like to point out here, moms that go back to work, the social media with the chest freezers full of breast milk, that's not the average. It's not the norm. Most moms that have to return to work, they are pumping for the next day.
Right.
At best the next two. So don't be discouraged. But again, that also comes along with the natural process. By the time mom's going to work, hopefully baby's not a newborn.
Right.
But yes.
Yeah.
Infants don't wean themselves under a year old. So I just want to define what weaning is not. So if your baby goes on a nursing strike, which is where, for reasons we don't know, baby just stops nursing one day, like he refuses the breast. And a lot of moms think, well, he weaned himself. And that is not the case if he's under a year old. It's either teething, maybe a sickness, maybe he heard a loud noise last time he was on the breast and he associates that. So just something to discern that if your baby is under 12 months old and abruptly stops nursing, seek help because they don't really want to wean right then.
Yeah, absolutely. So talk to me a little bit about like introducing nutrition other than the breast milk. When does that happen? Like I can imagine, especially here in El Paso where we're still at 105 degree, but any other hot place, the idea that our baby might need water just to stay hydrated. Would that be something?
Yeah, breastfeeding infants don't need anything extra. They don't need water. They don't need juice. They need nothing extra. Your breast milk provides all the nutrition they need. So whether you're in a hot place, a cold place, places in between, your breast milk covers their thirst and hunger needs.
That's so fascinating. I just love that. Okay, so let's say, for instance, I've got a baby. What are the signs for weaning and how would I start to do that process? Because this was, I still feel fear asking that question. It brings back memories of like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Well, and a lot of doctors today, pediatricians, will say anywhere between 4 to 6 months. Your baby has to be able to sit up and be able to, like they have a tongue thrusting, a natural tongue thrusting where they will, if you see babies and they're real tiny, they're just starting out on, parade foods, that they just kind of spit it all back out down their chin. That baby's not ready.
Okay.
You've got to be able to like intake it and swallow it. So experimenting with nutrition and starting solids is a messy business because it varies every kiddo different. Some babies are absolutely ready. I mean, you've got babies that sit at the family table and they're just like literally chomping at the bit, watching everybody's food go into their mouth, like just ready. And then some are like, 10 months old and they're like, I've got no interest. I'm just fine with milk.
Mhm.
So they
Mhm.
really are just fine in the first 12 months. You don't have to, but that causes a lot of confusion because you go take your baby to the pediatrician and they're like, oh, 4 months old, we got to start thinking about solids. And a lot of grandmas and great grandmas had this whole rice cereal business where babies needed to get started on rice cereal at 3 months. A lot of people put it in their babies' bottles, but that is a practice we definitely are away from now. That does not provide nutrition. It actually, you got to remember, breast milk sets your gut up for ultimate success. It doesn't mean you won't have allergies or sensitivities, but your nursing baby, you are setting their gut up from the get go on the best possible level. So as you introduce things, that's when your body can be like, reject it, or that's when oh, my baby's allergic to stuff, which again is another reason why you don't start. We think, oh gosh, if I eat bananas every day for a week, that'd be terrible. Well, we have a palate already. They don't have a palate. So you start out new foods slowly. Take them to the buffet and be like, oh, which of these 12 fruits do you like or vegetables do you like? That you just start out slow. So that way you can see how each food affects your baby and what they like and don't like.
So when we're starting to introduce solids, first of all, the child needs to be sitting up
Yes, they need to be able to hold themselves up.
in a high chair.
Yes, not wobbly, because your head, think about when you swallow, like if your head is wobbly, you can't swallow correctly. So they need to be able to hold up their head so that they can swallow the food.
And then they have to have that development of their tongue so that they can actually swallow rather than just spitting it out. So if they're
Right.
spitting it out, while it may be fun for grandma to quote unquote
Hmm.
feed them, it really isn't introducing them to any kind of nutrition. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, you're introducing to them as that it went into their mouth, but yes, they're not getting nutrition from it if they're not intaking it.
Right. So their primary nutrition is
Is breast milk up to 1 years old, even as you're introducing solids at
mhm,
6 months, whenever your baby shows signs of readiness, you think, okay, let's try this. Even if they're intaking, even if it looks like they're, quote, eating a lot of food,
mhm.
their main source of nutrition is breast milk for the first 12 months.
Okay. And so when I'm wanting to introduce solids, where would I start? Like, what is the first fruit? You mentioned the rice cereal. Would that be something good to start with or not good to start with?
I would not start with that. I would start with fruits and vegetables. And honestly, ladies, the baby food industry, a lot of it's great for convenience. So if you're busy, I get it, but babies don't, especially starting solids, even the tiny jars, they're not even meant to eat that much. Their tummies just aren't that big. So the packaging is kind of,
Off.
yeah, just like it makes you have the wrong idea. Kind of like you need to supersize everything.
Yes.
And we don't. And it's expensive.
Right.
So honestly, in starting solids, you can start with, I mean, like I said, fruits or vegetables. You're going to hear all sorts of camps of what do we start with, fruit or vegetables. It really doesn't matter whichever one you want to start with. But
Mm.
the nice, easy ones, I mean, I would not recommend starting with tomatoes. You want to start with like
Carrot.
sweet potatoes or bananas or carrots or
Mm.
peas. And all of these, you can just cook it. If you're making that for the family, if your family's having carrots that night, then just puree up a little bit for the baby. And another question people get is like, well, what if it's spicy? I mean, down the road, your baby, whatever culture you are and whatever your family eats, that is the palate they're going to get used to. So cultures where they have spicy foods, a baby's going to be okay with that. Whereas
Yeah.
more bland foods, at the beginning, definitely just start with your basic.
Yeah, it really is one of those things where, for me personally, when people say babies are expensive, it's really like such a
Mm-hmm.
myth. When you're breastfeeding, that doesn't cost any money. And when you're starting to introduce solids, like you said, there's no need to purchase those baby jars of food. You have the food, you're making whatever it is, whatever vegetable you're already making, the carrot, those sweet potatoes. I know for us, we used to do a lot of sweet potatoes, mainly because it was just easy to bake and we were
Mm-hmm.
already baking. And then we just took a little bit, maybe a tablespoon or something, and
Mm-hmm.
we would mash it and then just let them that eat it. And then how long? This is just a wonder question. I mean, I would always like sweet potatoes. So let's say I started with sweet potatoes and then I usually like use sweet potatoes like 3 to 4 days just to make sure that that's a good food for them.
Yeah, at least 3 to 4 days, even up to a week.
Okay.
And introduce one new food a week.
Okay. Okay. One new food a week.
That way, you know if your baby does have a reaction, like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, his skin is blotchy. That's weird. Where'd that come from? You can,
Mhm.
if you've given them new foods in 1 week, you won't know which one it is. So
Yeah.
you try, if they do good with the sweet potato or whatever you started with, then go to bananas next.
Mhm.
And then if they've done good with the sweet potato and banana, you can switch that up in the same week. So once you know they're okay with it, that
Right.
can stay on the plate type deal.
Right, right, yeah, and it's interesting about that because I know I've had a lot of friends, adults, who have had some sort of food allergy or some sort of allergy, and when they go on a food diet to try to figure out that's exactly what they eliminate so many things, and then they slowly introduce each new food until the tolerance. And I know for myself, that's what happened with me with gluten. I've gotten to a point now that I know the amount of gluten and when I've overdone it because now I recognize the signs of my allergic reaction, but it's not nearly as intense as years and years ago when I couldn't figure out what it was. So
Mm-hmm.
this is just actually a good skill to have for whatever. So we've introduced one food, then we've taken another week, we've introduced another food, we've taken it another week. Now we're introducing a third food and now we're switching it up. So after
Mm-hmm.
about a month, but we're still breastfeeding, correct?
Yes, absolutely. When people think of weaning, that's how they kind of think of it. So when you start feeding an infant, when you're going to launch into solid foods, you breastfeed your baby first. And then any solid food is a complement
Mm,
to whatever you're
mhm,
eating.
mhm,
So they're definitely getting their nutrition from breast milk.
mhm. Yeah, because a lot of times we think, again, human adult mentalities like I'm going on a diet and all of a sudden I'm going to do these things and that's not what weaning is. It's a slow,
Mm-hmm.
gradual
Gradual,
process.
ideally.
Yeah.
Ideally, it's a slow, gradual process
Mhm.
that, yeah, it takes time as babies grow and eat more. I mean, the second year of life, when the American Academy of Pediatrics still believes that they just came out that they
Rec
recommend breastfeeding for 2 years.
Yeah.
So you're still getting that nutritional value, but it
Mm.
does switch in that second year that
Mhm.
complementary foods are going to be more the base of what they're going to grow up and eat as a little person.
Right.
But the breast milk is still providing nutrition.
Yeah, the image I always like to give because this really helped me when I was trying to discern like how much and how fast and all of these things is the image of the two scales. And on the
Mm-hmm.
heaviest scale is the breastfeeding, and the one that's
Mm-hmm.
high is the introduction of the solids. And then
Right. Slowly.
slowly this
It's
shifts, but that slow doesn't like many mothers don't understand that concept of slow. So
absolutely
in reality, that slowness could be
a year.
a year, 2 years.
Mm.
I've mentioned this before, like with Johnny. I mean, Johnny was like clockwork. We could set our watch to when he needed to eat, when he needed to sleep. It was crazy. And in that third year, he really only nursed to sleep. So nap time
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
bedtime.
Exactly. And often those are the hardest times, like when moms want to wean. So there's child-led weaning and there's mother-led weaning. Child-led weaning, you've and the baby carry on your breastfeeding relationship as long as it's mutually a
Yeah.
good thing.
Hmm.
Yes. And so some parents do that when, yes, of course, your 3 or your 4-year-old normally only needs to nurse to sleep or just for a little bit of comfort. And then they're usually doing it for like a few
Yeah.
minutes. It's not like a 30-minute nursing session. It's kind of like a couple suckles to get them settled type deal.
Hmm.
But mother led weaning is when mom is ready to wean.
Right.
Breastfeeding is so important because it teaches you how to parent, because so many things in life are like weaning. We just don't really realize it. And
Mm.
if you're going to wean a baby, you can't just stop. If you've been nursing 5 times a day, you definitely just don't stop. Number one, you'll get engorged and you'd be miserable, and your baby will just flat out be like, "What is going on? This was my source, and this is fine, and now I'm just cut off." So,
Right.
even if an extreme medical cases, like if there's an extreme situation where the baby has to be weaned immediately, there are slower ways to do that and more appropriate. That's kind of a different topic than what we're covering today.
You're just talking about normal weaning.
Yeah, it's just
So
normal weaning. And as you do it, I mean, basically, you cut a feeding a week. So if your baby wants to nurse mid morning, you get up. Usually, the morning and the night feedings are the hardest to wean from.
right.
And then you want to start with your midday feedings, like the morning nap, afternoon nap, kind of like that. But the thing is, you have to replace that with something else.
Mm.
So yes, we're going to feed them. We're going to start solids, but you also have to do things like, especially if you've got a toddler that nurses and wants to nurse, and you're like, this relationship's done, buddy. I thank you. It's been real, but it's time to do something different. You
Mhm.
have to distract them with other things. Like, just think about it when you're trying to, as an adult, you're like, okay, I'm going to cut chocolate out. I mean, you can't, if you cold turkey it, you'll make it a couple days, then all of a sudden be like, I gotta have it. It's not very effective. So definitely, I mean, I know when I wean my toddlers, the ones that, and I've done it, I've done both. I've child led weaned, I've mother led weaned, and regard a child led weaning, like Nancy, for myself, my seventh child, I really have no idea when we stopped nursing. I don't know. Just one day I was like, wow, we haven't done that in a while.
Yeah,
So, and
that's really how that's the beauty of child-led weaning is that
mm-hmm,
it's such a gradual well, you said something so profound, like weaning really helps you parent. And I think it also
mm-hmm,
helps you become a human yourself in that there's something that you're trying to learn or you're trying to stop chocolate or whatever the thing going
mm-hmm,
into our spiritual life. Maybe I'm trying to practice this particular virtue. And then
yes,
all of a sudden, or this particular spiritual practice, like praying the rosary. And at first, it's such a struggle. And then maybe a year later, you're like, oh, wow, it's not a struggle anymore. But isn't that
yes,
what learning is all about? Like, think of the kindergartner who freaks out and doesn't know how to hold their pencil, can barely write an A. And then at the end of the year, they're writing their name, they're writing
mm-hmm.
certain words. It's a gradual learning process. And I think that is the harm that we do because as adults, we have mastered so many things that we expect perfection. And this kind of goes into the temperaments as well, right? Like, I want to complete the job. The choleric wants to get it done, you know,
Right. Yeah,
but that ease and that
absolutely.
comfort and that child weaning is so, so important because, like you said, if you're naturally at ease and you're letting the child kind of lead the way, it all of a sudden you become like one day you're like, oh, wait, when was the last time I nursed this baby? Like it just is such a gradual thing. And it doesn't become a battle, it doesn't become a stress, doesn't become anxiety.
And that's really what I definitely want to address about mother led weaning. It is going to take time. And if you don't take the time, you are going to have a fussy baby. I mean, that is going to happen because, I mean, they don't know how to communicate. I mean, they do on a baby level, but they can't say, Mom, I just want a little bit of breast milk. I just want to cuddle with you. So they throw a fit, and then you can get frustrated if it isn't going yet, especially if you've got that choleric personality. Like, this is the job. I want to get it done. It's taking forever. I mean, I was young when I started having kids, and I definitely had a lot of that. When I think about teaching my oldest son to ride a bike, and I was shamefully, and I've apologized to him for it, but I was so frustrated that riding a bike was hard for him. And of course, I mean, he did learn, but it could have been a much gentler approach. And so that's why I think the beauty you brought up just so many good points. And here, mamas, if you're listening to us, you've got the opportunity for Catholic coaching. So if you're in a process like weaning, then you got Mama Jane. If you're having certain kind of feelings come up, or you're like, this isn't going according to how I'm thinking it should go. I mean, that's a sign to say, hey, let me check in with someone that's done this, and sort your feelings out, because it is a big deal. I mean, it's another milestone. When your baby weans, you go to a different stage of motherhood. He goes to a different stage of childhood, and that's a big deal. So just a lot of grace and just knowing that it's going to be okay. I look at potty training similar. So many mamas just get so distraught over potty training. And I did too with my first one. And then I just kept having kids. So I kind of had a lot of them, and that had to get put on the back burner, like the stress of that, because, you can only do so much. But in the end of the day, most kindergartners go to school unpotty trained. They might have an accident, as
Right,
humans do
right,
sometimes.
right.
But just a lot of times when people say, oh, my baby was potty trained at 18 months, Mama, you were trained. You could see the signs. You had the availability. You were trained. Because usually it's about early potty training is 2, but honestly, 4 is not unreasonable,
Mm-hmm.
especially nighttime potty training. So everything is with patience. And that's the beauty of weaning from breastfeeding, because you do that before you have to potty train.
Yeah.
You learn to wean, so you learn that, okay, I mean, and it can be overwhelming, especially like I said, I mean, most of my babies that I weaned, I was pregnant with another baby. So I was kind of like, okay, look, this next kid's coming and I don't want to nurse two babies at the same time.
Right.
I ended up doing that in my motherhood journey, but the
Right.
first ones, I was like, I don't know about this. And
Right.
so it's easy to get kind of like stressed out or like on a timeline or put yourself a goal, that
Mhm.
some expectation. That's what it really
Yes.
is. You have an expectation. When you go into weaning, I mean, some kids are totally okay with it. Some kids really do wean easily. They're like, all right, cool, I'm fine.
Mhm.
This is great. And some fight it tooth and nail.
Yeah.
So, you definitely have to read your child and know yourself, and lots of grace.
I think you hit the nail on the head. Read your child, because we have to remember that breastfeeding isn't just providing nutrition for their stomach, it's providing them comfort, emotional well being, and safety and security. I mean, that's what every human being.
So true. Trust versus mistrust. It's the first thing out the door.
Yes.
And I know when I was weaning my kids, books, reading. I did so much reading to my kids,
Yes.
but I would be like, okay, well, before we nurse, let's read this book. And
Yes.
sometimes they'd forget about it,
Mhm.
distraction. They'd be like, okay, let's read another book, or you want to read this one again? And so that's what I'm talking about when you want to wean, replacing it with something else. You can't replace it with something unfun, like I'm going to put you in your room so you
Right.
don't breastfeed. I mean, none of us do well with that.
No.
When we're trying, like you said, with the rosary, or if you wanted to start a habit of going to daily mass and you put this insane pressure on yourself and then you missed one and you're just feeling terrible, like, oh my gosh, I've totally failed. That's not helpful. And God doesn't want that to be the process.
Exactly. Now, another really good technique that I discovered, and really this is actually how I started weaning, because I have this big age gap. And so Trisha was an anomaly. I was in the military, all that stuff. But with Johnny, I was pregnant with my third one. And I went to my doctor and said, I don't know how to wean him without, because Steve was in Korea. I was like, I don't know
Mm,
how to
yeah.
by myself as a single mom. And he just very graciously said, well, you know what? That's why you have two breasts. And that gave me enough peace that I was like, okay, I don't have to do this right now before this baby is born.
And what a blessing that you had a doctor say that, because so many mamas have doctors that as soon as you're pregnant, they're like, oh, you need to wean that baby immediately, and that is completely untrue.
It
And you
really
get a
is.
lot of pressure from
Yeah.
other sources, grandparents, aunties, uncles, friends, people in the street that don't know you. I mean, everyone feels like they need to give you isn't that baby weaned yet?
Mhm.
Hey, beautiful. You guys have the definition of weaning. Yes, we are. We're in the process.
Yes.
Because as soon as your baby's not a newborn anymore, you're in the process of weaning, technically.
Yes.
So,
Yes, that's exactly right. But that's what really helped when Steve came back was, again, Johnny was only needing to nurse for nap and bedtime. And so what we started first with bedtime because daddy could take him to the bath.
mhm,
He did bath time and then he read, and I would put baby Rose to bed. And then if he still was really like, no, I want mommy, then I would come in. But then those
mhm,
kind of just
tapered
gradual,
off.
yeah, tapered off, exactly. And it was really interesting because Rose was born in September, John was born in November, and for whatever reason, and I think you and I actually celebrated that Thanksgiving together, whatever reason, my husband decided that Johnny needed to be potty trained after Thanksgiving
Mm.
because he turned 3. And it was a crazy week. And finally, I just said, "No, we're not doing this." He had already, like, started recognizing the signs. Again, this is part of acknowledging a human body. Like, he understood, he could tell me he was 3, he could tell me he had to go potty when he had to go pee, but poo was the thing that really just put
Mhm.
him
It
over the
usually
edge.
is, especially for boys for some reason.
Yes. And I just told my husband, "I'm putting this on the back burner for right now." I mean, it was Thanksgiving, Christmas was coming, I was postpartum.
Absolutely. That's the other thing, mamas, don't take on a tackling thing like weaning during the holidays
Yes,
or during some big event. If you're moving,
yes.
if your husband's starting a brand new job, like if there's a big other thing going on in your life, that is not the time to start weaning or potty training or something that big,
Yeah, yeah,
because it
because
just so easily runs into frustration.
yeah, well, because the baby needs to breastfeed again for that emotional comfort because they can
Hmm.
feel the stress, they can feel the angst, they can feel the change of everything, and they need the
Hmm.
comfort because they're little. They don't know how to process their own emotions. They don't know how to verbalize their own thoughts. And breastfeeding can be that comforting. And I really think that's what helped John because Steve had come home from Korea. we moved, and then we had Rose.
A little shout out to the military families out there and any other profession that's not coming to the top of my mind that, there's lots of professions now that involves a lot of moving, a lot of the dad is gone for traveling for work. I mean, when you're single momming it, however you got to single momming it, I mean, it is harder. This is when you do enlist your friends. This is when you enlist help. This is when if grandma said she'd come to stay, then she can do, like you said, the bath and the bedtime routine. But this is definitely time to either reconsider, like maybe it's not time to wean, or enlist help, because it is very difficult to do alone. I mean, parenting's a full-time job. It's literally a full-time job.
Yeah.
That you never have a day off. It's 24/7, 365.
Yeah.
And everybody needs a break. We all need respite at some point. So if you're by yourself, and some military moms have it, and guys, again, I'm sure this isn't traveling in any aspects, but unfortunately, a lot of women are like, oh, you thought that was bad. I had twins in Germany, and then I flew back the next day, and my husband immediately deployed for a year, and I lived in a shack. I mean, it's like, come on. I mean, maybe that did happen, and I'm sorry if it did like that, but mamas, let's support each other. Be like, yeah, hey, I did move 10 days postpartum, and it was really tough. But these are some things that I did that did help. And then you can say, and these are things I know now that I can pass on to you.
Yeah.
So like if you're going to be moving, or if you have any say in the matter, like I personally have healthy enough pregnancies that I would rather move 9 months pregnant than 2 weeks postpartum.
Yes, exactly.
But you don't know that until you experience. So just keep that, any big milestone, mamas, just keep in mind that you've got to get that support.
Yeah.
And you can pop over to our Facebook page and put that out there like, hey, this is upcoming. What would you do? Or some suggestions for help. And that's the beauty of coming to breastfeeding support groups, the beauty of Catholic coaching, the beauty of the sisterhood, is that when it all just seems so overwhelming, somebody that's just one outside can look in and be like, hey, have you tried this? And you're like, whew. If you think about that, I mean, I love that your doctor said, well, hey, you have 2 breasts because, Quentin, my number 6 and 7, number 6 was not real thrilled with the arrival of number 7. And that's what my midwife suggested. Is like, well, if you thought about letting him nurse? And I was like, I mean, no, why haven't I thought about this? And I'll touch on this as well. I was a Lolita League leader and had been for several years, but at this point, and tandem nursing was hard for me. And maybe it was number 6 and 7, or I don't know what the formula was, but I literally would have to pinch my thigh and count to 60 for Quentin to nurse and just breathe through it. And I felt guilty, so guilty. Like, why don't I love this? Because, in all my meetings, people were like, oh, I tandem nurse is the best thing I ever did. Looking back, it is the best thing I ever did. He absolutely needed it.
Yeah. And the other thing is that they're so close. And that's one of those things that you don't realize. Again, you are mothering in a way that is so unique, that is such a blessing. So, mamas, we want to encourage you, if you're having thoughts that you have to have a timeline, or that you have to wean this child by this age or something like that, please come to Catholic Coaching. I will coach you on all these thoughts, all these ways, help you strategize, help you feel good with the choices you make, because really that's what all Catholic coaching is all about, is how to understand what your thoughts are, where they're leading you to, what kind of actions, and what is the fruit of those actions. So thank you so much. This has been a great, great episode. I really hope those who have not weaned, or, past the baby years, please pass this on to anyone who is thinking about breastfeeding. Do you want to close us with a beautiful prayer?
Oh, well, gosh, guys, I love my mother's manual, and I have 3 of them. I have the newer one right now in my hands is my oldest one that looks like it's been through a
7
storm,
children.
which it has.
Children.
That's right. But this I'm just going to read. I think I'm going to read a prayer to nurse a child. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Holy Mary, you remember devoutly how as a young mother you pressed the divine Jesus tenderly to your breast. You were not then denied that precious privilege of motherhood to nourish the life you had brought into this world. Dear Mother of Mothers, I beg you to speak to God with me now, to obtain the privilege that I too may so nourish the child to whom I shall soon give birth. May I know this fullness of the office of holy motherhood, and ask with me too, Holy Mother, that in the fulfillment of this blessed office which God has so beautifully ordained, I shall be closely drawn to my child with the tenderest mother love, and that by this bond of affection I shall likewise be better able to nourish the soul of my little one with the holy truth of faith, so that my child may serve its Creator with a strong body and an upright mind in fidelity and love. Mother of mothers, pray for me.
Pray for us.
Amen.
Amen. Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. All right. Till next time, Divas. Go ahead and like and share. Please subscribe. write a review. We say this all the time, but really it just helps us get the word out if you really like this.
Yes.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. We hope you really enjoyed this podcast episode today. And we just want to remind you to join us over at the Facebook group, Cycles and Sanctity. This is where we're going to have the continuing conversations and just get to know you all. So come on over into Facebook.